Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Tuesday, the 5th of December, 2017. Now, we're a little bit late this morning, about 15 minutes late, and that's because this morning we were establishing the third camp here at Kirby Misperton. It's extremely important that we keep the establishment on their toes. So we now have 3 camps here at Kirby Misperton in an attempt to create as much obstruction and opportunity for raising awareness as is possible for Barclays Bank here, who are trading as Third Energy, and of course awaiting Greg Clark's sanction to start the FRACK process. Now, interestingly, yesterday word reached me from inside the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy that, and I quote, Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, will be lucky if they're fracking this side of February. Now, of course, you know, you could take that with whatever pinch you like. It may have been thrown out to put us into a state of sort of relaxation through the Christmas and New Year period, but regardless of that piece of information, then there is absolutely no way we're taking our foot off the proverbial gas, literally and metaphorically. So here we are, still waiting. It's a veritable heat wave here this morning. The temperature must be all of, I don't know, 4 or 5 degrees, almost short sleeve weather. So obviously my blood is thickening up again. Feels quite pleasant, although there is a cloud covering that does smack of what's to come later in the week, which is dropping the temperatures and some more of the white stuff, which makes the landscape look really beautiful. But and actually it's better than the wet and the mud. But today I want to take a look at what's happening a little bit further south, because INEOS, who own a raft of licenses to the south of Morton here, right across from the coast into South Yorkshire, and of course those licenses extend down into Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. INEOS, having got their injunction in place, at least temporarily, which prevents anybody from taking any effective action to cause INEOS delay or loss. And although Derbyshire police seem to have intimated that, you know, well, that's a civil issue, we're just going to carry on doing what we would normally do, but then it's up to INEOS to initiate civil proceedings. So, you know, my counsel at the moment is perhaps to take great caution in any action against an INEOS injuncted site, unless, of course, you have zero assets. And I mean, there's an increasing number of people around the country, like yours truly, that absolutely have zero assets. So what are you going to take from us that we don't have? Well, you know, the threat of loss of liberty, well, you know, I think that's coming at some point in this country, because, you know, we are now where Germany was in 1934-35. You know, when, well, actually, we're not even quite in that strong a position, because, you know, people in Germany really thought that Hitler was their saving grace after the phenomenal burden of the Versailles Treaty and the reparations there. And, you know, through Hitler, they saw a way out. What they didn't realize was what was coming down the track. Here, it's increasingly obvious what is coming down the track, as we are not just tiptoeing now, we've broken into a trot as we fast approach the totalitarian corporatist police state, where the corporations have absolute priority over the private citizen. And of course, what INEOS have done, a foreign company registered in Switzerland, with operations here in the UK, in Grangemouth and in Merseyside and on Humberside, but not paying, you know, very much tax in the UK because they have a very tax efficient structure. They also have a remarkable debt plan, where, you know, they're buying businesses and using the assets of those businesses to effectively borrow more money. So, you know, if any of those businesses ever goes belly up, then the company can effectively just walk away. And Jim Ratcliffe, of course, walks away with his personal fortune, which is reportedly in excess of £5.5 billion. So INEOS, having, at least to say for the time being, it's still to be appealed, but having established that this injunction is now in place for the moment, then what their next step is to literally try and bulldoze through the last vestige of pretense of democratic process, and they've effectively given due notice that they want to bypass the planning processes with the local authority, with the county councils, and they want to go straight to central government. And they know fine well that with Syed Javid, they have a corporatist puppet in place who will do precisely what he's told. Of course, he'll go through the motions, the public inquiries, etc., etc. But this is purely to maintain the pretense of due process. In reality, it's a total charade. So, the people in South Yorkshire / North Derbyshire, in the communities of Woodsets, of Marsh Lane and Hart Hill, these communities, they should actually take a trip up to Kirkby Misperton and speak to the community here, or invite members of the Kirkby Misperton community to come and speak to your community, and they can share their experience of what has occurred here. And like I've said on many occasions, here in North Yorkshire, there is nothing more that the people here could have done to try to prevent this abomination from manifesting in their backyard through due process, through the planning regulations and through the courts. And so all they're left with now is literally the physical presence here at Kirkby Misperton. Now, I know there are people here in the community who are more than willing to come and speak to your communities. This is no longer hypothetical. It's no longer a what if. This is the reality if this industry does gain a foothold in your area. So, right now, we also have another couple of locations with iGas in Nottinghamshire, and one is at Tinker Lane and the other one is at Misson. Now, INEOS have a financial interest in iGas, a small financial interest. So what we will need to be doing is to establishing the legality of the INEOS injunction over property which they only have a minority interest in, because once again, this is the corporations trying to pull a fast one or work a flanker and get around the due democratic process. And so consequently, within literally 70 or so miles of here, there are 5 communities that are on the cusp of this manifesting in their backyard. And there are others where they're not yet necessarily under direct threat, but these companies are certainly looking to start the process. And of course, INEOS are also taking on the National Trust, because the National Trust have refused to grant permission for them to conduct seismic testing on National Trust property. But hey, what do you know? INEOS, which has zero respect for any other viewpoint, are now trying to sue the National Trust to gain access to their property so that they conduct their seismic testing. And the behaviour of INEOS smacks of that of QGC, the Queensland Gas Company in southern Queensland, which is now owned by Shell, but was previously owned by BG Group, which was part again of the spin-off of British Gas back in the mid-80s. And INEOS, just like BG Group, who showed no respect for the sacred burial grounds of the indigenous peoples there, INEOS show no respect for graveyards, for war memorials, and are literally looking to put their seismic testing equipment on whatever land just happens to be where they want to test. So, it gives you pretty much an insight into the mentality of the socio-psychopathic corporatist. And, Jim Ratcliffe, of course, sets that agenda from the top, and then it just filters downhill. And you don't work for INEOS unless basically you have effectively put your social conscience into cryogenic suspension. because otherwise you couldn't do this. You literally have to blinker yourself, pull the wool over your own eyes, not to be able to see, what you're doing to these communities, which is why these companies, in a lot of cases, actually employ foreign nationals who have zero emotional connect with the land that they are effectively looking to destroy within their targeted sacrifice zones. Now, it doesn't stop at Nottinghamshire, because obviously in the south of England is also under attack. And Michael Fallon, a little over 4 years ago now, famously stated, reportedly in a private meeting, that the resistance in the south will just ride roughshod over, and then they'll get to see how thick those rectory walls really are, and how they like flaring at the end of their street. Now, this was an extremely facetious remark, but of course he was also well aware that there was no possible risk of there being a license to frack at the bottom of his road. So he's no longer in the chair, of course. That is now falling on the desk of Greg Clark, who's the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And as we've discussed many times over the last few days, Greg Clark is seriously concerned, reportedly seriously concerned, that this could actually end his political career. Not necessarily in the short term, but if he signs this off here at Kirkby Misperton, that millstone of being responsible for kicking off an industry that will, at some point, cause horrendous contamination and devastation across the country, will fall back on Greg Clark. And believe you me, of course, we will make every effort to ensure that his name is indelibly printed on the minds of everyone who's living in these sacrifice zones. And some of the things that are being worked on right now is literally to serve notice on these individuals so that they will be personally liable, just like the government tried to do to the county councillors in Lancashire and Yorkshire, where they served notice that if they rejected the application, then they may be personally liable for the losses incurred by the likes of Quadrilla and Barclays Bank if they chose to pursue them for a reparation. Well, the reality is that's a complete crock. It was never going to happen, although obviously the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership was intended to establish a raft of supranational legislation, even above EU legislation, which would give the corporations the absolute priority over national law and the private citizen. So here we are. It's early December, and right now there's not a lot going on. I mean, we can hear the pumps turning over again, probably just circulating water, although today we haven't got the freeze in the temperature that we had late last week, or we're expecting next week. But what we do know is that the emissions from the diesel engines here on the pumps, the emissions from the site have already exceeded their permitted limits, which might explain why not too much is going to happen this year, because they actually need to get into another year so that they can have a reset to zero. And of course, the local community are scrutinizing the operation here like they haven't scrutinized anything ever before. And this is why I invite the communities in South Yorkshire, and by the way, the South Yorkshire group have done an amazing job in raising generic awareness, but obviously what they have not been able to do, because they don't have the first-hand experience, is of discussing with the community the methodology by which you put in the direct opposition. It's one thing to have the knowledge of what's coming down the pipe, literally and metaphorically. It's another thing to actually have a strategy so that you can literally do everything you possibly can to cost these companies as much money as you possibly can, and to discourage them from pursuing this agenda. And sadly, all you're left with is effectively civil disobedience. And as I touched on yesterday, an increasing number of people are starting to see the magnitude of this and the rate at which we are accelerating into this totalitarian corporatist state. And, you know, those who think that this is an exaggeration really just need to take a little bit of time and look at what is occurring. You know, we know basically for a fact that the British government has a strategy to try to remove the police from the corporate policing. To quote the interdepartmental memo I saw almost 2 months ago now, the objective is to achieve a motivation for change that is greater than the motivation to remain with the status quo. And obviously what they're trying to do is get the police to say, yeah, we want rid of this, we don't want this because, you know, we don't like being corporate enforcers. And then the government can say, well, okay, you know, we've got an idea here, we'll just hand that over to the likes of G4S and Serco and give them the powers of arrest. And, you know, if we think that North Yorkshire Police and Lancashire Police are somewhat excessive, and of course they are extremely excessive in their gratuitous aggression, then, you know, once we get into the likes of G4S and Serco, then, you know, we're going to see that go up a notch or 3. So this is an extremely important juncture in British political history. Barring Theresa May having a catastrophe, which is always possible, any day, a week is a long time in politics, then the likelihood is that they could be pushing this agenda for the next 4.5 years. Whomever comes into power in 4.5 years' time, regardless of their motivation for sustaining that agenda, it may be so far down the road that it's difficult, not impossible, but it's difficult to pull the plug on it. So it's absolutely crucial that we, the collective we, those people that still have the capacity for independent thought, with the power of discretion and discernment, to look at all the evidence that's out there and decide that either we're going to bury our heads in the sand, which of course the government absolutely rely upon, or whether you're going to actually stand up, step up to the plate and be counted and actually take pride in your contribution to protecting this beautiful landscape and this beautiful country of ours from rampant corporate aggression. It's a very sad state of affairs as we come up to the end of 2017. But on the other hand, it's almost exactly 5 years since the moratorium was lifted on unconventional gas exploitation in December of 2012. And it does look as though we're going to get through 2017 as another frack-free year. But 2018 is a totally different ballgame. And don't for 1 minute think that it's okay because there's a group out there, whomever they might be, that have got this covered. These groups are totally reliant on all of the individual creativity that each individual brings. We haven't yet, after 5 years, found the panacea that shuts this down. And, you know, it may be somebody comes along with something that absolutely is the silver bullet, as it were, and pulls the rug under this insidious industry once and for all. So meanwhile, we need to embrace all of the expertise, all of the creativity, all of the enthusiasm and talent that is resident within these communities. Anybody who tells you, and I mean anybody who tells you that they have the answer to shutting this down, well, they're either delusional or their agenda is somewhat more insidious, because no one of us has the ability to shut this down. It is essential. That's why it's the fastest growing community activist group that this country has seen probably since the advent of and the demise of poll tax. So let's keep this rolling. Now we're going to continue with these live streams, and if you've got this far, then I would guess that you know, you are a regular follower of the live streams and you are concerned about what this industry is doing. And of course there are always costs associated with doing what we do. So if you feel you can support what I'm doing and what we're doing here at Kirby Misperton, then please consider contributing, donating to the fracking awareness campaign. And you can find the button there on frackingnightmare.com. And this is the website that has the spreadsheet containing the 900 plus chemicals that were identified as being used by this industry in the United States. Now, it's been downloaded in excess of 13,000 times, and I invite everybody to download this Excel spreadsheet and just take a look at the not just the list of the chemicals, but what they do in the process and the harm they cause, whether it's harm to the ecology, to livestock, or to human health, because it certainly isn't pretty. The download is completely free, so please help yourself. But if you do feel that you'd like to help us continue doing what we're doing to raise awareness of this insidious industry, please go to the top left-hand corner of frackingnightmare.com, and any donation, any contribution, however small, is very, very greatly appreciated. We're going to be here for the duration. We're going nowhere. We have 3 camps, and who knows, ultimately it may be more. But meanwhile, don't forget, this is the winter of dissent. It's absolutely crucial that the people of this country peacefully make it very clear that they will not tolerate the corporations riding roughshod over their communities. And meanwhile, behind me here, we have the Barclays Bank well site. Of course, they're trading as Third Energy, but that's to throw you off the scent. And the Tag a Barclays campaign will continue all through December and all through 2013. And it is crucial, just like the people of Ireland ran off Shell back in almost a decade ago now. They ran off Shell when Shell was trying to establish a processing plant in the beautiful coastline of County Mayo, and Shell were forced to rebrand all of their petrol stations as Topaz. Well, let's try and do something similar with Barclays Bank, because they are on point here with this insidious industry. They have their downstream outlets. Let's use this opportunity to flag up not only their participation and their financing of this industry, but also let's make sure their customers know that if they continue to use Barclays services, they are effectively supporting this insidious industry. Ultimately, you can vote with your feet, but I think it's more effective if you vote with your wallet. So thanks very much for sharing with me this morning, and please once again help us get this message out there by sharing it as widely as possible. And under normal circumstances, we will be coming live at 8:30. I say this morning it was setting up the 3rd camp, and now I'm going to go back and see how that's going on. And if you are in the area, please come down and visit. We have a tea and coffee caravan here at the gates, and you're welcome to visit with the other 2 camps. And as I've said many times, if you haven't been to a protection camp before, you will be very surprised that, first of all, the people there do not fit the stereotypes that are pumped out by the lamestream media in their attempt to dismiss what we're doing. And you will find that the people here are extremely knowledgeable about this process, and they've done their research. And this is why ultimately the industry cannot succeed, because they're only doing what they do because they're on the payroll. We do what we do because we're passionate, and let me tell you, passion trumps payroll any day of the week. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll be back tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning with an update from Kirby Visperton.